Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is Miriam Wan. I'm an operations and quality management professional with 13 years of experience. I also have a background spanning accounting, finance, and audit, as well as monitoring and evaluation. Over the years, I have also supported leaders, operations teams, across diverse sectors like the government departments, telecom sector, digital healthcare, and field logistics enterprises. So my work has revolved around helping organizations translate strategy into practical, high quality execution and accountability. Today's training is designed for professionals at different career stages, those starting out, new leaders as well, team supervisors. You notice that as we grow professionally, some critical disciplines are learned through experience rather than formally being taught in school. And so many people only realize that they missed a stage later when they have either been promoted or when they're now in senior roles. So today's session is part of the Elevate series by LaunchPad Ventures Africa. This is a program that is tailored for professionals, for teams, operational teams, supervisors, as well as executives. Today's training particularly focuses on making those often untaught principles clearer and practical for everyday leadership and work. So again, I would say welcome to today's session. In our first session, which we had at the beginning of January, we focused on professionalism, ethics, and communication. Today, however, we move one notch higher and we shall be discussing performance and impact. The session answers a critical question. Why do some professionals grow quickly at work while others remain stuck, in the same position for months, for years, even when they have the same level of skilling or education? Is that something you have thought about? Well, the answer is not in intelligence. It lies in ownership, in professional judgment, and in consistency in how you execute your work. Many professionals work hard, long hours. They work hard. They put in long hours, submit reports on time, and do a lot of other actions that they're required to do on a day to day. But you need to know that not everyone delivers results even when they do these things. Points to note are these. At work, you are not paid for effort, you are paid for outcomes. Yes. And ownership means that you care whether the work succeeds. It's not just a matter of doing work, but you need to show that you care that the work actually succeeds. Ownership also means that you follow through without being chased to do your work. You don't have to be reminded to do work that you are supposed to do. Ownership also means that you as a professional think ahead. It means you're proactive. You do not just execute instructions, but you go a little extra. You think out of the box. You provide solutions or attempt to provide solutions where they are required. So it's important to differentiate tasks from results. Merely doing tasks does not mean that they will result into productive outcomes at the end of the day. And also, we need to be reminded that the effort that we put in needs to result into impact. Yeah. I'll give an example. Say if you had two employees, or if you were one of two employees, and you and a colleague were given the same assignment. One of you submits it late with an excuse. Trying to explain why it is late. the other submits it on time and even asks for more work, you know, or when they realize there's something that hindered them from doing the work even better, they bring it up and they mention it, you know, suggesting to their supervisor that something should be improved. Who do you think will be trusted next time to do another job? I mean, that's food for thought for you. But ownership of work is important because, like I've already said, it's not just about doing work, but it is about doing, it's about taking responsibility for what you already accepted to do. So, Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about this as proactivity. Yeah. And he describes it as choosing your response instead of reacting. So he goes on to say proactive people focus their efforts in the circle of influence, while reactive people focus on the circle of concern. So proactive means going ahead of yourself, and reactive means doing something after it has gone wrong. I would like to speak a little further about the circle of influence and circle of concern so that we all are on the same page. Yeah. So when I say circle of influence, when I say circle of influence, what I'm referring to is when I talk about circle of influence, this talks about things that you can control or directly impact. So as a professional, there are a number of things that you can control. And when you're able to control these, it can take you further into being excellent at your work. For example, your attitude at the workplace. You know, this is something that comes from within. And so when you're in control of your attitude, how you act around colleagues, your attitude towards work when you're given work, these are things you can control. Things like your choices on whether you do the work now or later can make a difference eventually in your outputs and the quality of work that comes out, you know. Things like your skills and when you match skills with choices, I mean, this can be this can work very strongly for you because if you have a range of skills, you choose when to use them, who to probably train, and how to use these skills, they can take you further. Things like the responses you make, how you communicate with others, you know. So it also involves focusing. Focusing here really builds credibility, trust, and eventually results. While circle of concern looks at everything that you care about, but you cannot directly control. Things like the economy, the politics of your country, other people's behaviors, organizational decisions. So when you focus here, you realize that it results into stress, frustration, and feeling reactive. And in the end, these things actually affect your output at the workplace. They affect how you grow because you will not be motivated or you'll not be looking on the positive side. The other thing I would like us to talk about, the other discipline, is managing upwards. Managing upwards does not mean controlling or manipulating your boss. No. Rather, it means working effectively with your supervisor to achieve shared goals. A core part of this is helping your manager stay informed and prepared so that they do not get surprises. So, as a strong professional, it's important that you clarify expectations early on your end. Yeah. I mean, even as a supervisor, you have expectations. Or if you're supervising a team, it is still important to clarify expectations early enough so that you receive reports on time from your teams, so that gets executed in time, so that if any feedback needs to get to you, you receive this feedback on time. It also includes things like giving updates before being asked. And like we have shared, raising issues early, not at deadline time. Time and priority management is also very important. Still, Stephen Coy talks about time and time management. So we need to understand that time management is not about squeezing more tasks into the day. No. Rather, it's about choosing what matters most and doing that first. What matters more and doing that first. So you realize that by doing the most important tasks of the day, you're able to achieve, you're able to achieve, you're able to utilize your most productive hours of the day. So if you're most productive in the morning, very fulfillingly, and within a short time, you have fulfilled about 80% of what you were required to do that day. And so you can always fill in the rest of the work in the rest of the 20% of the day. Or even if you're not able to fulfill those, I mean, you have hit 80% of your priority for that day. So that's good enough. Yeah. You need to understand that being busy means doing many things. We can all be busy. However, being effective means doing the right things. We need to understand that a full schedule does not necessarily equal to real progress. You could be busy the entire day, but at the end of the day, you have only achieved 20% of your day's goals. So we also need to understand what is urgent, or what we might term as urgent, versus what is actually important, for the task at hand. What is important is seldom urgent. And what is urgent may not necessarily be important. Yes? Urgent tasks demand immediate attention. Things like emails, phone calls, quick interruptions from a colleague. Yeah, that's the nature of urgent tasks usually. But they may not necessarily mean that the most important duties of that day. So important tasks create longer term value. Things like planning, people development, you know. So do not fault yourself for spending an entire day doing one of these important tasks and pushing the urgent ones to later. Though what is important is when you have an urgent task, it's important you complete it within the shortest time so that you can use the rest of your time for the more important tasks. It's also important to identify what actually matters. You cannot do everything well. You must choose what truly matters and say no to the rest. So it's important for you to plan your work, to protect your deadlines, and to avoid urgency traps. So if you have these three figured out, you will be able to achieve productivity, within the shortest time of your day. Professional discipline is also very important. Professionals should be able to decide what matters before the pressure starts. And like we have already said, you need to plan your work, protect your deadlines, and avoid urgency traps. It's also important to be able to deliver results without reaching a point of burnout. And how do you do this? One, you need to focus. High performers are not exhausted all the time. Rather, they are more focused. They are focused, yeah? So know what you want to achieve. And then set boundaries to ensure that you're able to achieve this. If you're focusing on your most important task of the day and suddenly you're called to another meeting, fine, you might be required in that meeting, but you need to be able to communicate, if it was if it's been communicated to you on short notice, you should be able to respond and say, look, as much as I really want to be in this meeting, this has come on very short notice. I'm afraid I will not be able to attend it next time. Kindly do communicate earlier, such that your boundaries are known. I mean, everyone knows you need to communicate either 2 days earlier or a day earlier if they require you to participate in a certain task. Yeah. So it's important to protect your boundaries. Burnout often comes from poor planning or having no plan at all for your day, for your week, for projects, or saying yes to everything. When you say yes to everything, this can also be a problem. You need to have boundaries. It also could come from last minute rushes caused by delay. So there are some colleagues who might often say they work best under pressure, but I must say this is not a very good principle to work by. So it's very important for you to plan. You could have daily tasks listed out, as well as weekly priorities. And also, you should have a mechanism of tracking clearly at the end of the day, at the end of the week, what you have achieved, what you need to push to the next day, or what you need to prioritize the next day or the next week in case it has slipped and you have not been able to achieve it. Another principle that is very important is problem solving at work. In professional environments, how you handle problems matters more than the problem itself. I will say, never take a problem to your supervisor without at least one possible solution. You can propose. So you identify the issue, you assess the impact, and then you propose solutions. It doesn't mean your solution must be perfect. No. It means you're thinking. And your supervisor, your lead appreciates, open thinking. They appreciate feedback. Accountability is also very important. So I'll call this accountability without assigning blame. Everyone makes mistakes, yes? So, and professionals are not judged by perfection. They're judged by response. So how you respond when it's time for you to provide accountability is very important. What I'll say is, one, you need to own your mistakes in case you have made any. Mistakes, shortcomings, you need to own them. And then you need to work towards correcting them. Do not own it and do it the next time. And then I'll also say, learn, be interested in learning. Seek information, do research, speak to someone who can do it better than you. So learn and learn visibly. And after you have learned, show cause, make it known that you have actually learned by improving. So I'll also talk about building credibility over time. So you realize that for you to grow through your course of being a professional, for you to grow at your work, at your workplace, within your environment, credibility is important. And it's not a one-day event. It doesn't just happen overnight that suddenly your supervisor trusts you and trusts your work or trusts your abilities. No. Credibility is built. And it's built by doing the simplest things. Things like you keeping your word. Do not make promises you cannot keep. If you're going to be late, communicate earlier. If you anticipate that you might miss out on beating a deadline, please communicate, yes? However, credibility expects that you set deadlines that you're able to meet. And also that you don't need reminders. No supervisor likes reminding anyone to do their work because you know why you are there. You're there to do the work, yeah? So Simon Sinek, in his book Leaders Eat Last, actually says, trust is built when actions meet words. So in most environments, in Uganda, within the African context, and globally, you realize that promotions or advancements are decided long before they are announced. And one of the factors looked at to make such a decision, it's trust, you know. So promotions, in most cases, are based on trust among other competence factors. So this is very important. We have some performance killers as well, and I would like to speak into this. Things like excuses, making excuses are very undesirable. Assigning blame, instead of accountability, you assign blame to your work tools. Your computer was not working well, and so you failed to deliver, within a certain time frame. You are in a meeting, and suddenly when you asked to submit, you say your audio is not working well, and yet this is something you could have figured out earlier on. You're blaming the weather for your lateness. Yeah, so excuses may sound reasonable, but they damage trust. And so your supervisor may not argue, but they'll simply stop relying on you. And what that means is if they're not able to assign additional tasks to you, it means they will not be looking at you for that promotion or for that advancement. I'll ask you, I'll make a mental note here. This is for you to think about. What excuse do you hear most often at work amongst your colleagues, or even excuses that you have made in the past? What are those excuses? And if you were your supervisor, what would this excuse signal to you? So at this point, I would like to say personal performance. Performance is a personal commitment. So it starts with you, it begins with you. Yeah. Growth is not an accident, it's something that you choose. So I do not know what you're committing to this week, this month, or this year, but it's important to write down what you would like to commit to. From the discussion we have already had, you know, some of the performance killers that we have talked about that you might have been exposed to, or that colleagues usually tell you about that you may not have really thought about. Sit down, get a notebook, write them down. You can write down one ownership habit that you would like to pick and one that you would like to drop. And then you can pick one improvement area and one action that you would like to start undertaking consistently. Like we said, growth is not accidental. You choose to grow and it's personal. So you need to take very intentional steps towards growing every day, every week, every month. And by the end of the year, you'll probably not recognize the person that you were 1 year before. And as we come towards the end of this session, I'll say this: talent, academics, your skills, they open doors for you. However, ownership of the responsibility you have been given keeps those doors open. Yeah. So you need to be intentional, you need to be deliberate, own your job, own your responsibilities, the tasks at hand, because ownership builds trust. Results matter more than effort. I will not care, or your supervisor will not care, that you have spent 3 days writing a report. Yeah. If your colleague has done a not very perfect report within 6 hours, that can communicate a number of major points that will actually be, that will probably be appreciated more. So results matter more than effort. So have results. And like we said, they don't have to be perfect. Consistency creates credibility. Your career will not grow because you're busy, no. But it will grow because you're reliable, you're thoughtful, and you're intentional in how you execute your tasks. So I would like to say to all professionals that are listening in, learn to work with intention. Be deliberate about the work that you do, the effort you're putting on, how you're doing it. Be deliberate about wanting to grow and to learn more. Deliver with integrity. Yes. And make efforts to grow deliberately, consistently. You can set 3 months milestones or 6 months milestones on different areas that you want to grow. So that shows consistency. John Maxwell, in his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, does remind us that small positive disciplines, when repeated daily, compound into lasting success. So, like I said, we need to implement daily habits, weekly habits, monthly habits, set periodic milestones within which you can always check yourself, yeah, or timelines for you to grow in certain areas that you have previously been struggling with, such that you do not reach a point and stagnate. Still, in line with this, I would say, and this is, conversely, bad habits go in the same way, quietly undermining progress over time. So if you keep embracing killers of performance, um, you know, negative attitude and other and basically other things that are out of your control, this will drain your energy. And in the long run, you realize that these practices are not helping you get anywhere. So again, like we said, success is not sudden. It's a result of consistent, intentional actions. Yes. So at this point, I would like to thank you for your time and, and for being here for the live. And I would like to share with you the address in case you would like to reach out to us or visit our website. You can always find us on info at launchpadventuresafrica.com in case you'd like to send an email, or if you'd like to check out our website, you can check it out at launchpadventuresafrica.com. So that's it from us today. Thank you so much for participating and have a great day.